Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The cold steel of the dagger didn't tremble against his throat. It was steady, promising an end that was as inevitable as the rising sun. Valerius blinked, the haze of sleep shattering instantly under the pressure of the blade. He wasn't in his studio apartment. He wasn't holding his tablet, scrolling through the final chapter of the Obsidian Crown. He was lying on sheets of spun silk, the scent of sandalwood and old blood filling his nose, looking up into eyes that burned with the intensity of a dying star. They were eyes of molten gold, the eyes of Kalen Dragomir, the fallen prince, the protagonist, the man destined to sever Valerius's head from his shoulders in exactly 3 months' time. "Give me one reason," Kalen rasped, his voice a ruined velvet growl that vibrated against Valerius's chest. "Why I shouldn't paint this bed with your corrupt blood right now." Valerius's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, but his face, the face of the Empire's most reviled villain, Duke Valerius von Hexter, remained an icy mask of indifference. He knew this scene. It wasn't in the book. In the book, Valerius never woke up when the assassin came. He just died. Which meant one terrifying thing. The story had already changed. "Because," Valerius whispered, forcing a languid, mocking tilt to his lips despite the terror clawing at his throat. "If you kill me, you'll never find where I've hidden the antidote for your sister." It was a lie. A desperate gambit of a lie. But the blade paused. And in that pause, Valerius knew he had bought himself a few more seconds of life in a world determined to destroy him. The realization had come in fragments over the last hour, piecing together a nightmare. Valerius had transmigrated. He was no longer a literary critic in modern Seoul. He was Duke Valerius, the Viper of the North, the cruel advisor to a mad emperor, and the primary antagonist of a dark fantasy novel infamous for its tragic ending. In the original text, Valerius was a one-dimensional monster who delighted in the torture of the protagonist, Kalen. He broke the prince's body, humiliated his spirit, and eventually drove Kalen to a blackened awakening that burned the empire to ash. Valerius's death was supposed to be the cathartic climax of the first arc, a public execution fueled by the cheers of the liberated masses. But looking at Kalen now, hovering over him in the dim moonlight of the ducal bedchamber, Valerius saw something the author hadn't written. He saw exhaustion. He saw a man not just driven by vengeance, but by a profound, hollow loneliness. Kalen was thin, his collarbones sharp enough to cut, wearing the rags of a gladiator slave. He had broken into the manor, bypassing the magical wards, driven by sheer will. Valerius slowly raised a hand. Kalen flinched, the knife pressing harder, drawing a single bead of crimson. "Easy, Your Highness," Valerius murmured, using the title that was treason to speak. "I am not going to call the guards." "Your lies are poison, Viper," Kalen spat. "You drugged the guards. You left the window unlatched. Was this a trap? Do you enjoy the game that much?" Valerius's mind raced. The window was open. The original Valerius must have been arrogant or drunk. But he had to use this. He had to pivot. "Perhaps," Valerius said, his voice dropping to a smooth, lower register. He channeled the arrogance of the character, layering it with a newfound complexity. "Or perhaps I am simply bored of an emperor who treats me like a dog, and I was curious to see if the wolf of Solaris still had his teeth." Kalen's eyes narrowed. The confusion was a crack in his armor. Valerius exploited it. "Get off me," Valerius commanded softly. It wasn't a beg. It was an order given by a man who believed he was untouchable. Miraculously, Kalen pulled back. He didn't sheath the dagger, but he retreated to the foot of the bed, a crouched shadow ready to spring. Valerius sat up, sweeping his long, silver hair over his shoulder. He wore a nightshirt of black silk that hung loosely over a frame that was deceptively delicate. "My sister," Kalen demanded. "Where is the antidote?" Valerius stood, his bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. He walked to the side table and poured a glass of water, his back deliberately turned to the assassin. It was a power move, showing trust where there should be none. "There is no poison, Kalen," Valerius said, turning around to lean against the mahogany desk. "Your sister is safe in the convent of St. Iria. I sent her there 3 days ago under a false name." The lie flowed easier this time because it was based on a plot point Valerius intended to make true immediately. In the novel, the sister died in the dungeons. Valerius had to change that. Kaelin let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. You expect me to believe the man who whipped me in the public square has turned into a saint? I am no saint, Valerius replied, his eyes dark. I am a pragmatist. The emperor is mad. The empire is crumbling. And you? He looked Kaelin up and down, taking in the bruises, the dirt, the raw potential. You are the only weapon sharp enough to cut the rot out. But a broken weapon is useless to me. I am not your weapon, Kaelin snarled, stepping forward, the distance closing again. The air between them crackled, thick with unspent violence and a strange, confusing tension. Then be my partner, Valerius said. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Why? Kaelin asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why treason? Why now? Valerius looked at his own hands, pale, slender hands that, in this world, had signed death warrants. Because I have seen the ending of this story, Kaelin. And in that ending, we both die screaming. I have decided I would prefer to live. The following weeks were a delicate dance on the edge of a precipice. Valerius could not simply set Kaelin free. The emperor's spies were everywhere, embedded in the walls of the Hexter estate like termites. If Kaelin disappeared, Valerius's head would be on a pike by noon. So, Valerius hid him in plain sight. He declared Kaelin his personal body servant, a pet that he wished to break personally. It was a cruel guise, necessary to keep the emperor's suspicion at bay. To the outside world, the duke was as sadistic as ever, keeping the fallen prince on a short leash. But behind the heavy oak doors of the duke's private library, the dynamic was vastly different. Your stance is too wide, Valerius critiqued, looking up from a stack of documents. Kaelin stood by the fireplace, practicing with a sword Valerius had forgotten to lock away. He paused, sweat glistening on his bare chest, his glare lethal. I learned to fight in the pits, Viper. I survived while you drank wine. And you fight like a brawler, not a king, Valerius retorted, standing up. He approached Kaelin, the height difference apparent. Kaelin towered over him, a wall of muscle and resentment. Valerius reached out, his cool fingers touching Kaelin's elbow, correcting the angle. The contact burned. Kaelin froze. For a moment, neither moved. Valerius could feel the heat radiating from the other man, the rapid beat of a pulse at Kaelin's throat. He looked up, catching Kaelin staring at him not with hatred, but with a bewildered intensity. Why do you touch me like that? Kaelin asked, his voice rough. Like what? Like I am. Precious. The word seemed foreign in Kaelin's mouth. Valerius pulled his hand back as if scorched. You are an asset. If you die due to poor form, my investment is wasted. Liar, Kaelin murmured. He took a step closer, crowding Valerius against the heavy library table. You feed me from your own plate. You change my bandages yourself. You read to me when you think I am asleep. I read aloud to practice my rhetoric. Valerius deflected, his heart betraying him with a stuttering rhythm. You read poetry, Kaelin countered, placing a hand on the table on either side of Valerius, trapping him. The smell of him, musk, steel, and soap, was overwhelming. You are plotting something, Valerius. You are weaving a web, but I cannot see the fly. The fly is the emperor, Valerius hissed, trying to maintain his composure. And we are the spiders. Do not forget that. And what happens when the emperor is dead? Kaelin lowered his head, his lips inches from Valerius's ear. What happens to the viper then? Then, Valerius whispered, closing his eyes against the sudden rush of sensation. You can kill me. Kaelin pulled back, his expression unreadable. Maybe, he said softly. Or maybe I'll find a better use for you. The turning point came during the winter solstice banquet. It was a mandatory event, a display of excess in the heart of a starving capital. Valerius had to attend, and he had to bring Kaelin. The emperor, a bloated man with eyes that roamed too freely, sat on the obsidian throne. The court was a shark tank of silks and jewels. Valerius entered, dressed in deep midnight velvet, with Kaelin a step behind him, dressed in the livery of a servant, a silver collar locked around his neck. A prop, Valerius had assured him, the key hidden in Valerius's pocket. Ah, Duke Hexter, the emperor boomed, wine spilling from his goblet. And his prize. The court tittered. Valerius bowed, a perfect, mocking incline of the waist. Your Majesty, bring him here, the emperor commanded, gesturing to Kalen with a greasy turkey leg. Let us see if the Prince of Solaris still has his pride. Valerius felt Kalen stiffen behind him. This was the danger. The emperor wanted humiliation. If Valerius refused, they died. If he complied, he lost Kalen's trust forever. He is tedious, Your Majesty, Valerius drawled, stepping between the emperor and Kalen. He has no tongue for wit and no skill for entertainment. You would be bored within seconds. The emperor's eyes narrowed. I did not ask for your opinion, Hexter. I asked for the boy. And I, Valerius said, his voice turning cold and sharp, echoing through the silent hall, am telling you that he is mine. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a possessive claim, one that bordered on treason. To deny the emperor what he wanted was death. The emperor stood, his face flushing purple. Yours? You forget your place, dog. Everything in this empire is mine. He snapped his fingers. Guards, seize the boy, and strip the duke of his rank. The royal guards surged forward. Now, Valerius shouted, spinning around. He didn't reach for a weapon. He reached for Kalen. He grabbed the collar, twisted the hidden mechanism, and the silver band fell away with a clang. At the same moment, the glass skylight above them shattered. Rebels. Kalen's loyalists. Chaos erupted. Arrows rained down on the royal guard. Nobles screamed and scattered like roaches. Kalen was instantly in his element, snatching a sword from a fallen guard, moving with the lethal grace of a tiger released from a cage. Valerius stood amidst the carnage, calm. He had orchestrated this. The message to the resistance, the timing, the position. It was all part of the script he had rewritten. Go, Valerius shouted over the din of steel. The path to the east gate is clear. Kalen cut down 2 guards and turned back, his chest heaving, blood spattered across his face. He looked at the open door, then at Valerius. Come with me, Kalen shouted, reaching out a hand. I can't, Valerius said, shaking his head. If I leave, the magical barrier around the palace will seal. I have to stay to keep the wards open from the inside. Go, Kalen. Be the king you were meant to be. It was a noble sacrifice. It was the perfect redemption arc. Valerius would die here, holding the door, and Kalen would live. But Kalen didn't move. You idiot, Kalen growled. He didn't run for the door. He ran for Valerius. Kalen, no. Valerius screamed as the emperor, seeing the betrayal, raised a heavy crossbow aimed directly at the duke's heart. The bolt flew. Valerius braced for the impact, closing his eyes. But the pain didn't come. Instead, a heavy weight slammed into him, knocking him to the marble floor. He opened his eyes to see Kalen hovering over him, a crossbow bolt protruding from his shoulder. Why? Valerius gasped, his hands trembling as he pressed them against the wound, warm blood seeping through his fingers. You were supposed to leave. You were supposed to win. Kalen gritted his teeth, his face pale, but his eyes burning with a terrifying, manic light. He grabbed Valerius's chin with his bloodied hand, forcing him to look. I don't want a kingdom without you in it. Valerius, Kalen choked out. I told you. I am not your weapon. I am your fate. Kalen ripped the bolt out with a guttural roar, ignoring the spray of blood. He stood, pulling Valerius up with him, shielding the duke with his own body. Kill them all. Kalen roared to his men, his voice carrying the authority of a god of war. But leave the emperor to me. The coup lasted 3 days. When the smoke cleared, the obsidian throne had a new master. Valerius woke in the royal chambers. His body ached, but he was alive. He sat up, panic seizing him. He had survived. The villain had survived. This was wrong. The narrative integrity was shattered. The door opened. Kalen walked in. He was no longer the slave in rags, nor the gladiator. He wore the black and gold of the emperor, a crown of jagged iron resting on his brow. He looked majestic, terrifying, and utterly calm. You're awake, Kalen said, closing the door and locking it. Kalen, Valerius breathed, swinging his legs out of bed. You did it. You won. We won, Kalen corrected, walking to the bedside. He looked down at Valerius with an expression that made Valerius's stomach flip. It was hunger, possessiveness, and adoration all twisted into one. I should go, Valerius said nervously, standing up. I have estates in the south. I will retire. I won't trouble your reign. Kalen laughed, a low, dark sound. He stepped forward, forcing Valerius back until his knees hit the edge of the bed. Retire? Kalen asked, placing his hands on Valerius's shoulders. You think I burned the world down just to let you leave? I am the villain, Kalen, Valerius argued, desperation creeping into his voice. The people will hate you if you keep me. I am the symbol of the old regime. Let them hate, Kalen whispered, leaning in, his lips brushing against Valerius's. Let them whisper. You rewrote my destiny, Valerius. You saved me when you should have killed me. You bound your soul to mine the moment you spared my life in that dungeon. Kalen reached into his pocket and pulled out something that glinted in the light. It was a ring. Not a wedding ring, but a signet ring, the seal of the imperial consort. You wanted to control the story? Kalen said, sliding the heavy gold ring onto Valerius's finger. It was a perfect fit. Fine. Then you stay right here, by my side, and you write the next chapter. But know this. Kalen kissed him then, a bruising, claiming kiss that tasted of victory and iron. When he pulled back, his golden eyes were dilated, swallowing Valerius whole. This is a horror story for everyone else, Kalen vowed. But for us? It's forever. Valerius looked at the ring, then at the man who had conquered death for him. The plot was gone. The tropes were shattered. And as he looked into the eyes of the monster he had tamed, Valerius realized with a shiver of thrill that he didn't want to escape anymore. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by letting himself be devoured. If you enjoyed seeing Valerius lose control to his own creation, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who locked you in a palace for your own protection? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Kalen, tall, muscular build, wearing black and gold imperial robes, jagged iron crown, long black hair, golden eyes, intense possessive expression, blood smudge on cheek, hand gripping man 2's chin. Man 2. Valerius, silver hair, slender, pale skin, wearing loose black silk nightshirt, sitting on edge of luxurious bed, looking up with mix of fear and desire, wearing gold signet ring. Background is dark Gothic royal bedroom, moonlight through shattered window, velvet drapes, dramatic lighting, cinematic composition, sharp focus, intricate details.